Today we're going to be going over Dune, and we have over here OC, who is a book reader. He's read book one to the fullest, and we have 4 movie watchers. And I do want to disclaim, I've read it up to like 120, but I would say I'm still just a movie watcher, not really a book reader. But without further ado, let's get right into it. OC, what are your thoughts between, the book versus the movie?
Honestly, I was very impressed with how well they adapted this book into the movie version. I think that most book readers going into this movie were apprehensive about how it was going to come across, because the Dune story is very vast and there's so many details in the world building that while you're reading the book, you're kind of just dropped into this world and you're forced to figure it out as the story progresses. It doesn't really take a lot of time to explain things to you. You kind of just have to pick up on things. And I was curious about how that was going to translate into the movie, because while that works to an extent in the book, I can see how if you try to do something similar to that in the movie, you'll lose a lot of people and it might not even be an enjoyable experience. So I was a little bit interested. I was very curious about how they were going to make that work. And honestly, I was very impressed. I think that they did a great job of explaining everything that is relevant to the story, as far as like the details in the world around Dune. They did a great job of explaining it, showing it, visualizing it, especially with the voice, the Gom Jabbar, the Bene Gesserit, all of those things that are kind of that are central to the story. They did a great job of explaining it in the world of Dune in the movie. So I was impressed with how they did it.
I'd imagine that they have to cut stuff out.
They did. Like they kind of alluded to it, like the characters who their eyes go white when they are calculating things. They don't really explain that in the movie, but in the books you understand, like they're called mentats. You understand a little bit more about them, and it kind of explains. And even in the book, Paul is trained in what they do to an extent. So there's some details that are in the book that they don't necessarily show in the movie, but it's not necessarily as important.
Well, they're really cool. They're like basically human computers, right?
Right.
Because computers are like outlawed, right? And like, there's no technology besides
computing machines are outlawed in the world of Dune.
Wait, but we didn't know that from the movie, right?
No, you don't know that from the movie. So this is like backstory
spoiler
thing.
Right?
Well, I don't know. I feel like, because if I'm correct, because I saw the 1984 version, I think they kind of hinted that
in the 1984
version. So
you'd have to watch the 1984 version to really know, because I watched Dune twice.
I think we all did.
Yeah, it really deserves a second watch.
Except for Chuku.
Well, I watched the 1984 version as well, so
that's
twice. That's twice. I watched
know if
the
that
original
counts.
and so that's twice.
But so, like, I watched it first, and it's interesting to note, because in the very beginning you had mentioned that, you're dropped into this universe, you kind of have to figure your way through. And when I first watched Dune, even though I didn't completely finish the book, I still felt like I was dropped into this entire universe, and I had to follow along and pick up the pieces. And it wasn't until I watched it a second time where I really let go, and I already knew the universe I was, walking into, right, that I was going to be watching. It wasn't until the second time where I really, really enjoyed the movie. Just because, like, you really do have to realize that you're in a whole nother world. Like, you have to get used to that world building and everything else.
Even as a book reader, do you think it needed a second watch?
I think it's one of those movies that benefits from a second watch for sure.
I think it would.
I think that there are a lot of details that if you, I will say it's a long movie. It's it's a vast movie. There's so much world building. It definitely is one of those movies that improves the more times you watch it.
Yeah. Going in, I knew, because I knew about how the book is like you just dropped in the world, no explanation. I knew I would kind of have to go in the movie with that in mind. So I tried to get as much of like the world building as I could the first time. And the second time I was concentrating more on the dialogue, and I ended up liking the movie a lot more that way, because I was picking up on like little nuances from the dialogue, which I loved.
Yeah, I think the movie was shot really, really well.
Yeah, definitely.
And
Agreed.
like visually,
aspect.
it's like a masterpiece.
Yes.
Is it page to screen? Do you think that visually it's like reminiscent of the book?
It is, although I mean, obviously there are details that you imagine differently in your head, like the thopters looked different than like the mosquito wing things that they have.
Yeah.
in there. But that's just like you visualize things differently
like
in
the
your
thopters.
head.
It's a dragonfly.
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 That's right.
Also, it's like it's maybe more grounded because it's practical sets. Like they're in the desert.
The
Yeah.
way that
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve, like this, honestly,
Denny.
this
Our boy
honestly
Denny.
made me view the director Denis Villeneuve in a different way. Is it? Yeah. Anyway, it made me view him like as in such a higher caliber now. Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
by far my favorite movie that he's directed. Of the ones that
Yeah.
he's directed.
Well, he's great. He was already like really up there
Yeah.
for me, as like a Blade Runner fan. But
Ooh.
this one was, I mean, tonally totally different, but still had his style, which makes him like one of like the greats already as far as like directing for me.
And I will have to mention the score was great. And you don't get that, when you read a book. Like, you don't have like
That's
music
true.
flowing through your head
Yeah.
to set
Yeah.
the tone or the pace. So as a book reader and a movie watcher, did you have a preference between one or the other?
See, this is an interesting question because we only got the first half of the Dune book in this movie version. So I would say that this is such a good adaptation that if you're somebody who doesn't necessarily appreciate being dropped into something without explanation, you would probably prefer the movie to the book. And I think that on that level, the movie definitely does a better job of bringing people along for the ride than the book does. I think you can properly critique the book by stating basically that, hey, you're forced to figure things out on your own, and that can get in the way of enjoying the story. And then there's also some weird things with perspective in the book that can sometimes get in the way of it. The author likes to put you in the minds of different characters a lot of times, and the flip side of that, the negative to that, is that you are aware of things before they happen, and so it's almost like you're spoiled for what's about to happen in the story.
And like in movies, like it's just tradition to have a protagonist that we've experienced the story through, which is more like easy to follow.
Yeah.
Like I have a copy of Dune. I never finished it because I was like, dude, the point of entry for this, like I can't get into it.
It is high.
Yeah.
I guess based off of that, would you say that the book deserves a second read?
Oh, for sure. Like if you have read it, I think you would definitely benefit from a second read. I haven't read it a second time. I don't know if I'm not going to read it a second time anytime soon. Maybe in 5 or more years, I would pick it up again. But definitely definitely reading through the book multiple times is probably where the fandom comes from. Like people have been a fan of this book for decades.
Yeah.
And there's a reason for that. I think it's a book that while, your first introduction is hard, every time you go back to it, it becomes easier and better, and you get more from it, and I think that's a good thing. And then I'll bring up another point. The second movie that is going to be made that will cover the second half of the book apparently will be focused on Shawnee as our primary character.
Ooh,
As
really?
the protagonist,
Interesting.
is the
yeah.
story going to be through her eyes?
It's what it seems like.
Wow.
So
That's interesting.
I think that's a really good.
That's a good move.
As somebody who is aware of, and you're aware of how the story's going to go because you saw the 1984
Yeah, 84
movie.
version, yeah.
As somebody who read the book, I think that this is a really good idea. I think it's a really good idea to focus more on Shawnee's perspective.
Yeah, way
because of the way that Paul's character kind of goes. I don't want to spoil anything.
Yeah.
But because of the direction that his character goes, I think it's great that they're switching the
Point of
the
views.
point of view
Yeah.
to focus on Shawnee's point of view.
I
Yeah.
think, movie watchers maybe have already started to sense like where things are going with Paul.
Yeah.
But also, I do think the biggest critique a lot of people had for Dune was like, not enough Zendaya. So like,
Yeah, that's what
it's
they
a
said.
good direction, on that front,
Yeah.
Yeah, but like going with that 1984 version, because that was the most recent one I watched, I definitely think this goes to a point where it's like, it's good that we have movies that also, like, because a lot of people hate, oh, why do we always have reboots? Like, this is a good example of something that needed to be reboot because watching that 1984 version, it really does not do justice to that book and the story. It really just, like, looking at it, it did not age well. There was just so many things that look ridiculous. Like the shields look like something that you would see on freaking like a SNES game or something like that. So and not to mention it came out around where Star Wars was coming out. So it's like it definitely didn't get the love and whatever.
Even after Star Wars.
So now that Star Wars is doing bad, Dune has a chance to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, sci-fi resurgence right now. There's a revival of interest in sci-fi, and I love how you bring up that reboot thing because I agree. I think reboots aren't bad, but we should take properties that maybe didn't have a lot of attention or weren't the greatest adaptations and reboot those things because I think that's great because you have room to grow.
Agreed. So if you have read the book, definitely put your thoughts in to the comments below. If you just came in as a movie watcher, also put your thoughts in below. And if you enjoyed the video, if you found value in it, give us a like and subscribe. So we'll see you later.
No spoilers.
No spoilers. No spoilers.